begin. A lot of people are davening Marav at this time, but I don't think I want to change it from 8:45. We'll make do. I think it works.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go. I davened earlier,
Right.
but usually it's 8:15, and you can make it home on time. You should be on
Right.
on time hours. So and after that, there's a 9:15 and 9:45, and I think a 10:15. So it shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
I think you should consider doing the daf before the late Mincha Mariv. Like if Mincha Mariv is 8:15, maybe you can do daf from 7:30 till 8:15.
That depends on the track. Are you home by 7:30?
I'm not. That would knock me out completely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I sometimes experience. I mean, on the great nights, I'm home very fast, but on some nights it's like terrible.
Yeah, sometimes I make it home just by 8:30.
Yeah.
And well, anybody else, it's the majority.
Okay, so let us begin. Let's just want to just see over here. Okay, so so we're up to here. Today's going to be a very quick, easy daf. The Mishnah said let's just go quickly to the Mishnah. The Mishnah said on the top of the page. 1 second. Yikes. Where did I put it? All right. Oh, here. The Mishnah said, 1 second. Okay. The Mishnah said, right over here. Cholza b'shnayim. If two people oversaw the chalitza, right, or three of them, you're supposed to have three, and one of them turned out to be disqualified. The Tanna Kama holds the chalitza is pasul. Reb Shimon and Reb Yochanan said you could have two. Okay, they say it's kosher with two. You need at least two because you need people, and you have to have at least two there witnessing that a chalitza took place, but you don't need a three of a bezdin. And then the Gemara and the Mishnah brings a story that there was a person that did a chalitza, and it was a private chalitza affair in jail, okay, in prison. And this story came to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says it's kosher. You didn't need a whole bezdin over there. That's what we just learned. So the Gemara says over here, we're on daf. Today's daf is daf Kuvav. We're starting from daf Kuf Hey Amid Beis, about like 10 lines from the bottom. So the Gemara says like this: Cholzer b'shnayim. Amar Rav Yosef bar Menumi, Amar Rav Nachman. Ein halacha ka'oisa zug. We don't paskin like that. A pair that held that that you need that two is enough. Actually, the halacha is like the Tanna Kama that you actually need three to oversee a chalitza. Says the Gemara. Why do Rav Nachman have to teach this teaching again? Rav Nachman taught it once before. Rav Yosef bar Menumi, Amar Rav Nachman, chalitza b'shloisha. You need three people to oversee a chalitza. So why did Rav Nachman have to repeat himself by saying the halacha is not like the person, like the peer of Rabbi Yochanan who said that chalitza is good, fine with two. So the Gemara says, Sricha, I need two statements of Rav Nachman making it very clear that the halacha is like the person that says three. If he would just say that ein halacha ka'oser zug, he would say that the halacha is not like the ones that hold you need that two is fine. I would thought that means in beginning, if you can try to have three. Aval di'evid, but ex post facto, afilatrei, I would think that even two is sufficient. Kamash malam, no. Ein halacha ka'oser zug. Halacha is not like that oiser zug, and that's why if you would just say chalitza b'shloisha, I would think that it's only a din lechatchila. Because many things in chalitza, by the way, as we're seeing, is only lechatchila, like the kriya, certain things, or the order. So I might think the fact that you need three is only a din lechatchila, but b'di'eved, two is fine. That's why he said, no, the halach is not like that pair, and two is not fine. If you teach me the teaching that halach is not like that pair that said two is good, Ela Tanna Kama, the halacha is like the Tanna Kama. So I would have thought the Eved, that's only, you need three, b'di Eved. Aval Chatchila liboya chamisha. I would think that really you should even have five, because there's a stricter opinion called Rabbi Yehuda, which we had once before, who said you need five to oversee the chalitza. Tzricha. That's why Reb Nachman had to make his statement very clear that you need three people. and 3 people make a chalitza, not less than 3, and you don't need more than 3. Nevertheless, as we saw before, that although you need 3, we add on 2 just to publicize the event. So even they're not part of the main bezdin, but they come along. We try not to do a chalitza less than 5 people there. Masa shecholza beino leveino miyadana. The Gemara said that the story that it's brought in the Mishnah, that 2 people had a private affair and they made a chalitza, the yavam with the yavam. So miyadana, who said witness? How do you know it's true? Just because they say they did it, how do you know they did it? You need an outside, outside witnesses. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, be'edim royin oisem bechutz. They were in jail, but there were edim that were watching the chalitza from the outside. So maybe a cellmate or something like that, they were observing how this couple made chalitza. So the Gemara asked a shaila, that is the story, who was in jail over here? Were the couple outside of jail? Rabbi Kiva was the one that was in jail. And they asked Rabbi Akiva, as you know, prior to his execution, Rabbi Akiva was in prison for a while. So they would ask him questions in jail. Actually, the Gemara said, the Yishalmi says, Rabbi Yochanan Sandler asked him this particular question while he was in jail through the window. So it was the story of the people outside jail, and Rabbi Akiva was the one that was in jail. Dilma, maybe the opposite. The people who did the event of the chalitza service, they were in jail. Rabbi Akiva was outside jail. Rabbi Yehuda said the name Rav. The story was that the couple was in jail. And the question to Rabbi Akiva came while he was in jail. So it's very important to note that even though Rabbi Akiva was in jail, he was still the leader of the Jewish people and giving halachic decisions. We go Daf Kuf Vav Amud Aleph. Now the Gemara says a very interesting situation over here. Tanu Rabbanim, rabbis taught chalitza mut'as keshera. A very deceptive chalitza is kosher. What does that mean? Ezehi chalitza mut'as. What is called a deceptive chalitza? The answer is what we're dealing here is with a recalcitrant yavam. He doesn't want to do chalitza, and she doesn't want to marry him. So what do you do in such a situation? So Amar Rav Shlokish says, this is the way you make it happen. Kol she'oimrim lo, you tell him, chalitz, allow her to take off your shoe, uvakach ata kainsa, and that's the way you're going to marry her. He doesn't know chumash, he knows chalitz, he knows that you take off the shoe. So you fool him into thinking that the way you marry this lady, your sister-in-law, is allowing her to take off your shoe. And with that way, the Brisa, way Rav Shlokish explained the Brisa, that's exactly what the Brisa is saying. That if you fooled him to do a chalitza, he's thinking that he's doing a yibam, it's ksheira. That's a fascinating thing. So that's Rav Shlokish's version of how you explain the Brisa. Rabbi Yochanan said, "Ani shoyne ben shneskaven hu v'lo neskaven he ben shneskaven he v'lo neskaven hu chalitza say pesula." I have a brisa that says that if one of them doesn't know, whether Yavama doesn't know what's flying, or the Yavam doesn't know what's flying, or is not focused on what they're doing, the chalitza is pasul. Achi skavnu shneim ke'echad. They both have to know exactly what they're doing with intention. So therefore, you can't fool a person telling him, "Oh, do chalitza," and that's how you're going to marry her. That's how you're going to tell me the interpretation of a brisa that the chalitza is kosher. So that can't be. So what is a deceptive chalitza? And you're dealing again with a recalcitrant guy. He's a very difficult yavam. Ella, the way you're fooling into making a chalitza, you tell him, do chalitza. She's going to give you 200 zuz, just do the chalitza. And then as soon as he does the chalitza, you don't follow up with the money. So you fooled him into doing the chalitza. That's kosher. You don't have to follow up giving the money. And Rashi explains that why, even though you made that condition, certain conditions that don't align itself up with the rules of the condition of Bnei Gad, Bnei Ruvain. In Chumash, it describes in Parshas Matos how a conditional contract is supposed to be made. And chalitza, you can't make a condition on a chalitza, because chalitza is something that has to be performed by the person himself. You can't send a messenger. Therefore, any condition that's attached to this chalitza is considered as if it's unattached. So it's almost as if you said chalitz law, and he's thinking he's getting 200 zuz, but it's not attached to the chalitza. And therefore, you actually fooled him into doing a chalitza. You will see later on that for a get, if you make that condition, it's a good condition. And if you don't follow through on the condition, the get is invalid, because the get can be done through a shliach. We'll see that in a moment. This is the Brisa explains it more clearly. Chalitza muteis kishera, a deceptive chalitza is kosher. Eizehi chaluta muteis, exactly the way Rabbi Yochanan explained it. If you tell the man, do the chalitza, you're going to make money on it, and then you don't follow through, it's still a good chalitza. There was one lady, she fell to a yavam that's not an appropriate person. In other words, he was of shady character. And they told him, they told him exactly, give her a chalitza and you're going to get money out of it. And they didn't follow through with the money. Rabbi Chiva heard the story. It said it's a kosher chalitza. Says the Gemara, two stories. There was this person that came to Rabbi Chiva Abba, a yavam, that wanted to do he wanted to do yibam, right? He wanted to do yibam, but the lady didn't want to do yibam with her. Amala, so Rabbi Chiva said, "Biti, my daughter, Amaidi, get up and join join this person to do yibam with him." Amr loy Amos, so the mother stepped in and told Rabbi Chiva, "Yeshivasa zihi amidasa." By her staying at home, that's her stepping up to marriage. In other words, what she's trying to say is that this person would not be appropriate for my daughter because he's a shady character. Amallah, so Rabbi Chiva bar Abba says, "Yudatle, do you know him that you can say such a thing about a person?" Amalei, so the mother said, I know him. He sees that my daughter has some money. And so therefore he wants to be miyabam her in order to wipe away her money, to take her money. Maybe he's a gambler or something. So therefore the mother suggested that this is not going to be a good shidduch. Amallah, so the Rabbi Chiva bar Abba double checked with the girl herself. You don't like this guy? So he said, I don't like this guy. So now you're dealing with a guy who's not going to be maskim. He's not going to be maskim. So you got to think about this. This guy is not going to be maskim to do chalitza. And you have to fool him, but you can't fool him with money because he wants to marry her for a lot of money, right? And therefore you're going to give him 200 zuz. He's going to say, no, I want to do yibam. I'll get 1,000 zuz. So Amalei, so Chiba Abba came up with another idea, similar. Do chalitza, and that's the way you're going to marry her. Not like Rish Lakish that it's a good chalitza, but Labasa the chalitza, he did it. He told her he did it. He's thinking that he's going to do yibam. Amalah, so he said to him, Hashta. Now he said, Hashta minach ipasla. You did a chalitza, even though it's pasul. Yibam is now off the table. You threw yibam out the door. You can't do yibam. So now do a regular chalitza. So she can be permitted to go out to the world. So he fooled her into he fooled him to do a chalitza pasula, thereby invalidating any possibility of him doing yibam. And then he forced her to do a regular chalitza. That was the way Rabbi Chiva bar Abba got out of this situation. Then the Gemara says another story. Bas Chamud Rapapa, the sister-in-law of Rav Papa, Rav Papa's wife's sister, right? Rav Papa had a wife, and his sister, Nafla Lefnei Yibam She'eina Haganlah, fell to Yibam to an unappropriate person. So also the Kami Debaya, they came to Abaya to settle this matter. Amalei, so he told the Yavam, chalitz law uvakach ata koinsa. Do that, do chalitza, and that's the way you're going to marry her. So Rav Papa, who was a young man, right? And basically what Abaya was trying to say is do the idea of Rish Lakish. Fool him into thinking that chalitza is actually, doing yibam. And the way Rav Shlakish learned on the beginning of the page, that's called chalitza mutas. So Amalei Rav Papa, so Rav Papa said to Abaya, you got it all wrong. Didn't you hear what Rabbi Yochanan said? That's not a kosher chalitza. You're telling him that the chalitza is a yibam, and even if he does it, that's still an unkosher chalitza. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said. So Abaya asked back, so what should I do? What would you tell me to do? Amalei, so Rav Papa said, do what Rabbi Yochanan said. Chalitz law, tell him, do chalitza, amanasha titan l'chom esayim zuz. Tell him, I'm going to give him 200 zuz, just do the chalitza. So the Yavam did it. Levasa the chalitz law, after he did the chalitza, Amalah, so Abaya told the lady, Zil Havle, go give him the 200 zuz. You said you're giving 200 zuz when he does the chalitza. Amalei, so she said back to him, Meshata anibach avidele. I was forced into this, and I fooled you into thinking that I'm going to give you 200 zuz. And this is the way Papa defended his sister-in-law from actually paying up the 200 zuz she promised for the Yobam. Because Rav Papa is defending her by saying, Milai Tanya, didn't we learn a brisa that if you're fooled into paying for something, you don't have to pay for it? The example is that if a person was running away from jail, he just escaped from prison, and he has to cross the river. There was a ferry in front of him. And he told the ferry operator, "Tul dinner v'avireni, take this dinner and take me across." There's nothing against him. All he has to pay is the normal fare. He doesn't have to give the whole dinner, because alma we see amalei mishatani b'cha. You could say, I was just kidding around. I was just forced into saying a high price, so you just get moving. In this case also, she can say, I fooled you into giving the chalitza, to giving the chalitza by promising you this money. I don't have to make due on my commitment. So Abaya was so moved by Rav Papa's wit and sharpness and erudition, but Abaya was asked him a question. Avucha heicha, where's your father? In other words, do you have a father that's around that's helping you learn? In other words, is your father supporting you? Amalei b'masa, he's in the city. Imcha heicha, where's your mother? Amalei b'masa, my mother's also in the city. So basically, your papa had normal parents who were giving him support so he could learn, and that's why he became so sharp in learning. Abaya, on the other hand, was an orphan. He didn't have that opportunity, so he felt that he was shortchanged, so to speak. Life shortchanged him. So, but Yav Be'ena, in that conversation, sort of he gave an ayin hara to Rav Papa's parents, ushchivam, and they both passed on. Tana Rabbana, fascinating. Tana Rabbana, chalitzas mutas kisheira. The chalitza that's deceptive is kosher. Get muta pasul. A get that's deceptive is not kosher. Chalitza mu'useis psula. A chalitza that's forced is pasul. Get mu'useh, a get that's forced, kosher, it's kosher. So the Gemara is going to explain what that means. Hey chadami. What does it mean that a forced chalitza is pasul? Right? What does it mean? You forced him. You whip the yavam to give chalitza. If right before doing the chalitza he says, "Oh, I'll do it. I want to." Even chalitza would be kosher, not just get. If he didn't say "I want it" and he just did it, but didn't say the word "I want it," get nami loy. A get wouldn't be kosher. If you whip a guy and then he just gives a get, it's not kosher. So what's that? What is that all about? Hachi kama. This is what we're saying. Chalitza mutas loyim kosher. If you fool a guy giving to chalitza, it's always kosher, and you don't have to follow through on the payment. The get muta, but if you fool a guy to give a get, in other words, you promise you promise money you promise him money for a get, and you don't follow through on the money, lo'ilam pasal. Okay, so that's very important. If you tell a guy you're going to get $1 million if you give this get, if you're not going to follow through with the $1 million, the get is going to be pasal. Unlike chalitza, but chalitza mu'ush says the get mu'usa, if you forced it, like you whip the person, zimn and kosher, sometimes it's kosher, zimn and pasal, sometimes it's invalid. Hard to Amar writes in, if right before giving the get or right before giving the chalitza, he's got whipped enough that he's going to say, I want it, then it's kosher. Ha, Dolai Amar writes ani, and when he doesn't say the word writes ani, I agree, then it's never going to be kosher. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, if a person is obligated to bring a carbon and he refuses to, yakar voice, we force him to come. The pasuk says we force him to bring the carbon, the sacrifice. Malamid is teaching you, shekaifin, you force him, you belt him, you do whatever you can. Yachal bal karche, it should be against his will. Talmud Bavli, the pasuk says he has to want to do it. Okay, how do you resolve these two contradictory psukim? One pasuk says that you could actually force him to do it, and one sense it has to be voluntary. So the answer is koifenois. You force him until he says, "I want to do it." Same thing is by gittin. When Bezdin had the power to do so, it wasn't a problem of agunas. Koifenois, they would bring him to Bezdin, whip him, and then he would say, until he says, I want to do it. Because as it says, even though it seems to be forced, but underneath all the layers of shells of a Jewish soul is a good heart that wants to do the right thing. And that's why it's kosher. Amar Rava, Amar Avschari, Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, Cholzin afal pi she'ein makirin. Now here, what the Gemara is discussing is who is it if a woman and a man show up for a chalitza, who is on the onus to determine if they're true? In other words, maybe they're just making up a story to get the paper from Bezdin that they got a chalitza. Maybe the Yavam didn't show up. Maybe the Yavama came with somebody else and says, this is my Yavam and we want to do chalitza. So who's checking out, verifying that these people are not actors, but actually real people, so that they don't give out a license that a chalitza was done on a person that chalitza wasn't really done. So the Rav Huna said, Cholzin afal pi she'ein makirin. Bezdin does chalitza, and they don't have to investigate the background, do a background check of the people in front of them. They're doing a service. You come to Bezdin, we'll give you a chalitza. They do mian for a girl, even though they don't know if she's really married. Therefore, since Bezdin doesn't investigate people, the Eidim that are in the crowd that want to write up a document saying that they saw a chalitza taking place, ein koisvim, they should not write a get chalitza, LMK makirim, till they investigate the matter. They can get me in LMK makirim. Why? The chayshin the bezdin toyim, because we're afraid that if they're going to write a chalitza took place, the second bezdin that they come to and say, oh, we have a license. This lady has a license. She can get married because she had a chalitza in the previous bezdin. Wait a second. Who did she have a chalitza with in the previous bezdin? Was it with the yavam or was it with some actor that came in? So therefore, we're afraid that she's going to go someplace else and use this paper that says she got a chalitza, and really she didn't get a chalitza. She hired an actor to do it. Rava said it in his own opinion regarding this matter. Bezdin should really investigate it. Don't leave it on the people in the on the crowd, but actually Bezdin should not perform a chalitza unless they surely investigate who these people are. The they don't do mian until they know the people in front of them, the character in front of them. Therefore, get chalitza, get in other words, if you're in the crowd where the Eidim write up, we witnessed the chalitza, they can be rest assured that the Bezdin took on the onus of investigating the people to make sure that they are real. And therefore, they can write up a get chalitza, that they witnessed the chalitza, and give it to her, so that she can go someplace else to get married. We go to Kovava Mabez. Mishnah says, mitzvah chalitza, this is the mitzvah of chalitza, and it's discussing how is it done, very quickly. So mitzvah chalitza means it doesn't have to be in this order, but we try to follow the order in the Chumash. Bahu v'yavinta lebezdin, him, the Yavam and the Yavama come to Bezdin. His Bezdin, he decides which Bezdin, and they investigate it, and the Bezdin checks into who's coming over here. If there's an old man with a young girl, they give him advice. They give him appropriate advice. And they say, they call him and they speak to him and say, look, there's such an age gap between you and the Yavama, even though you mean it l'shem shemayim, that's a point. We're not talking about somebody that doesn't want to do yibum l'shem shemayim. He means it l'shem shemayim, but we tell him, nevertheless, that you don't realize that by an older man marrying a younger girl, it's going to lead to, it's not Hollywood, it's going to lead to a divorce or a strifeful marriage. So fine, they're ready to do the chalitza. He takes their advice. She says the pasuk. He does not want to do yibum with me. My yavam does not want to make a child on his brother's behalf. He doesn't want to do yibum. And he says, you're right, I don't want to take her. I want to point out that there's a very big difference between what she's saying. She's saying, as the pasuk says, he doesn't want to do the mitzvah of yibum, right? But he's saying that I don't want to take her. I want to do the mitzvah yibum, but not with her. So it's a very big difference. Maybe if she's shamed to say that she's not suitable for him. And the Gemara says, they say these words in Hebrew. And actually, the Bezdin would read it to them, and they repeat after the Bezdin. Then the pasuk says, then we follow what the pasuk says. It's not that you read this, but the Yavama goes to his shoe. Now, we saw what the shoe looks like, but she has to take off the shoe with her right hand. She can't use her left hand. She unties the laces and the buckles from the bottom up. And then maybe she can hold the foot a little bit with her left hand, but really do the whole thing with the right hand. He cannot help her. So it's, she really has to pull the whole thing off. And then the halacha is that you throw the shoe on the ground. You can't hold on to it. You have to throw it right away on the ground to show that you're not taking back your shoe. It's not your shoe. You're just performing the mitzvah of chalitza. Then the Yarka B'Fanav, she makes a big spit, not a little spit, but a big spit right in front of it, and it has to pass the front of his face. Roik Hanirali Dayanim. It has to be a big spit that the judges can see it. V'ansa v'amra, and then everybody says, even the best space. That's what we done to a person that didn't want to build his brother's house. Atkan hoyamakrib. That's what they would read in the Chumash. Rabbi Hurkin has had his bezdin under an Elah tree in the village of Eitam, right? It was on the village of over there. And the Gemara is called HaParsha. He actually finished the entire Parsha, right? And Chuchzuku Lias Garmin College Parsha. Then everybody would finish the entire Parsha. In other words, if you look at the Psukim, after they say Kochiyos Lish, he would go on in his chalitza ceremony. He would say V'nikra Shema Yisrael Beis Chalutz Hanoel. He would add those words, and that became the minig in all places. Everybody now does V'nikra Shema Yisrael Beis Chalutz Hanoel. They announced that. Who says those words? Beis Chalutz Hanoel, that he should be known as Chalutz Hanoel, the guy that got a shoe taken. Mitzvah b'dayanim. The mitzvah is all the judges. Well, mitzvah b'talmidim, not by the people in the crowd. Rabbi Yehuda says, mitzvah kol ha'oimnim sham loyma chalutz hana'al. That it's a mitzvah on everybody in the crowd to say he got his shoe taken off. Now, from the Chumash, it implies that this is like a disparagingly remark that he didn't want to do yibam, and then so we publicize this person in an insulting way that he got his shoe taken off. But in the way our Mishnah is learning it, it's actually a praise, because we're talking about a person who is advised not to do yibam, which sometimes, and most of the times, the advice is not to do yibam. So we call him chalutz hana'al, that we're proud of him, that he followed the direction and the advice of the Chachamim. Amar Rav Yehuda, mitzvahs chalitza koire, you read the psukim, right? In other words, as I've said this before, when they come to Bezdin, she says the first statement, Me'ein Yabi. Then he says a statement that she doesn't want to. I don't want to take her. And then after the chalitza, she says, "So shall be done to the man." So the Mishnah says, "Kaira." She first says the kaire, and then he says the chaletzes. Then they do the chalitza, and they do the spit, the kaira, and then she has the final reading. So she reads twice, once at the beginning, once at the end. My kamashmal masnisani. Isn't this the Mishnah? What are you telling me this? It says the Gemara, Hakamashmal, I'm teaching you mitzvah hachi. The mitzvah is this way, precisely in this order. The epach, but if you turned it around, they did the spitting before they're taking off the shoe, les lembad, there's nothing wrong with that. Tan yanami hachi, bein shehigdim chalitza lerkika, bein shehigdim rekika lechalitza, masha also asi. If you did the taking off the shoe before the spitting, or the spitting before the taking off the shoe, it's okay. That was the chiddush. Amar Abaya. Abaya said, Hayman de makri get chalitza, loy likri ledida, loy lechudei, v'avme yababi lechudei, the mashma avayami, eloy avayami, eloy avayami. What Abaya is saying is that when the Bezdin reads, let's say they're coming to a Bezdin, so the Bezdin has to tell her, repeat after me in Hebrew. Say these words. They tell the lady, loy avayami. He did not want to do yibam with me, but don't pause between the word loy and the word avayami, as we see on the screen. If you pause, then it sounds like loy, he did not. Avayami, he wants to do yibum. So be careful to say it together. And that the pasuk is saying he did not want to establish a name for his brother. That is, loy avayami, he didn't want to do yibum. But don't pause. And same thing with loy chafatzti lekachta. When he's saying, I don't want to take her, don't pause between loy, the word not, and chafatzi, wanted to. Because then it will see, if you take a pause of loy, then it would seem to imply chafatzi lekach, that he does want to do yibam. So in other words, you have to make sure that it's very clear to the crowd and the people listening and what she's saying, that it makes sense. The tonality has to make sense. That's what he's saying. Don't read the word loy by itself and chafatzti lechudei and chafatzti by itself, the mashma, because that could imply chafatzti lekachta, that the other wants to marry her. Eli, you have to read it loy chafatzti lekachta. You have to read it quickly. I don't want it to take her. The Gemara says, Rava says, afsuki milse les lamba. If you do take a pause, there's no problem with it. There's no problem with that. Rav Ashi, he says you don't have to be so concerned about that. Says the Gemara, Rav Ashi ashkache Rav Kana de mekanstaya umakre la loy avayami. Rav Ashi found Rav Kana was stressed out. He was the one reading it for the Yavama, and he's trying to say it fast, like avayami. And for some reason, he kept repeating it, because he wanted to do what Abaya said, that you have to read it very quickly, so she knows to read it very quickly. On Malay, so Rav Ashi said, don't you hold what Rava said, that even if there's a pause between the word loy and avayami, it's also okay. On Malay, when Rava would agree that you're not supposed to interrupt by the loy avayami, because when did Rava say that interruption is okay? Is by loy chafatzti lekachta. I did not want to take her, because no one can make a mistake by that. Loy chafatzti v'omar, he said, loy chafatzti lekachta. Everybody knows that the meaning of that phrase is that he did not want to take. So even if you pause, nobody would make the mistake. But by the loy avayami, there is a possibility that a person could misread what the woman is saying, because you could read it me'ein yavami lahakav lahacham shem b'Yisrael. The idea of not doing that, loy, is not the thing that he wants to do. Avayami, he wants to take yibam. So in that pasuk, even Rava would agree, don't pause between the loy and the avayami, and that's why Rav Kahana was very concerned to do like Abaya and not pause between the avayami. The Gemara continues, Hayman Amar Abaya, Hayman the cause of Gita the chalitza. When you write the evidence, the get of the chalitza was done, liktov hachi. He says like this, we read from the words me'ein yavmi, ... till the words ad avayami. In other words, when they wrote up the chalitza was done, they didn't say, oh, we read the following words from the Chumash, because you have to write only 2 words of the Chumash, ... and everybody knows what you're talking about. And then also, and also when you're writing Lididei, for his psukim, we read midloi from the word loi ad lakachta, till the word lakachta. Vakrina Lidida, then she did the reading min kacha from the word kacha bad chalutza till the words chalutza. What the Gemara is saying over here is when they write up that book they write up that letter of that the chalitza was done, don't write psukim out on the letter, because they used to write on parchment. And if you're writing something on parchment, once you write 4 Hebrew words of a pasuk, you have to underline it. You have to scratch it out like they do in a Sefer Torah. So in order to avoid that problem, and that's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So therefore, in order to avoid that problem, when they wrote up the get chalitza, which was written on parchment, they only wrote 2 words of the pasuk, me'ein yabmi, ... and you knew till ad other yami, they kept only referencing 2 words of that pasuk. You knew what it was meant, that the chalitza, that they said the whole pasuk, but they didn't want to write 4 words of that thing, because then they would have to unline it. Then the Gemara says, Mazutra, he didn't have a problem. He would write the whole parsha of Yibam, and Misharte, the Kosev L'Kula Parsha. And then he would write the whole Parsha. The whole Parsha of Yibam, he wrote it out in the Psukim. The Chalitza was performed as it's written in this Parsha, and they would write it all out, like a whole Parsha on a cloth, on a parchment. Now, so the Gemara asks, how could you write one part of the Chumash on a parchment? You're supposed to, the only time you can do that is if you're writing an entire Sefer Torah. But the Gemara says you're not allowed to write out one piece on a parchment and that's it. So the Gemara says the halacha is like Marzutra, that you could write the chalitza, because when do we say you're not supposed to write one piece of the parchment, even if you're doing underlining, is when you want to learn it. Let's say you want to learn a parsha of the Torah, so you decided to make a little piece of the parsha of the Torah and have your own piece of cloth with the scratches, and you're learning from it. That's usher. But here it's just part of a license. Nobody's learning from it. It's just proof that chalitza took place. That's why it was permitted. This is the question of why they hang ketoris in the shul, the ketoris in the shul, that it's written on cloth, and that's maybe not correct, because it's not a whole Sefer Torah. You have to only write it on parchment if there's a whole Sefer Torah. One more minute. Amar Abaya. If she spat and the wind blew it away, and it didn't cross the face of the guy, of the Yavav, it's now code. My time of Yaakov Mopanabein. It has to cross his face. Hilkach hu arak hu gutza. If he's a tall man and she's short, as soon as she spit, she's always right in front of him. He's a tall man. Even if the wind, brushed it to the side, that's also okay. He arukavu gods, but if she's tall and he's a shorty, so when the spit came out of her mouth and the wind blew it away, it never passed in front of his face. But it has to pass in front of his face and then go away. So that's not good. Amar Rava said, Achel Tuma, if she ate garlic over Roxa and spit, or Achel Gagishto, she ate some medicinal clay, Roxa and she spit, because that's not spit that comes from, that's generated spit. My time of the Yarkam Asma Be'ina Beleka. She has to work up the spit by herself, not like have some gum in her mouth or something that's causing her to salivate. The Amar Rava says, finally, the Yam have to see the spit coming out of her mouth. Why? From the eyes of the Canaan, they have to see the spit. And finally, so they have to have a good view of the spit. The Nikra Shmoy be Yisrael, base Chalutz Anal. Mitzvah B'dayarim B'layt Tamin. Everybody has to announce Chalutz Anal. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yehuda says, Pam Achas Hayini Yoshev Lefnei Rabbi Tarfon. We was Ubasi Bam Lachleit. So Rabbi Tarfon was overseeing a Chalitza. And Amar Alanu, he told us the whole crowd has to say 3 times. Anu Kulchem Chalutz Anal, Chalutz Anal, Chalutz Anal. You are the guy who got a shoe taken off. And that's it. You have to say it 3 times. And that's what we do at Bizman Hazeh. Hadan Allah, Mitzvahs Chalitza. By Hashem, we finished the 12th parak of Yevamos.